Hello, I'm Edouard Gruwez, and in this video I'll be talking about the TLSM framework for presentations and professional communication. Why would I compare a presentation to an onion? Why this metaphor? Of course, you get it, because it's layered. An onion is made into different layers, and we peel it or eat it from the outside in, but it grows from the inside out. And this is exactly the same with a good presentation or a good text for that matter. Now, how does that work? Look at what happens in the brain of the audience. They hear my words, they see my slides. Their brain will focus on a few elements in these two. They will interpret that information, recombine it with what they know already, create new knowledge or make a decision, and store that in their long-term memory. Now, what do I want to do to create a really good presentation? It's the same thing, but in the other direction. I start by thinking, what is in the brain of my audience? And what do I want to change in there? Then I have to think, if they are in point A now, I want them to get to point B, is what information do they need? What kind of logic will lead them from A to B? Once I have that logic, I need to add a few things to that, to make it attractive, to make it clear, to make it convincing, to make sure that the story sticks. Then my story is ready. And then I just need to make slides or text and prepare myself. So these are the 4 different phases, which I've given a name. I call them thinking, logic, story, and media. And you have to think of these as 4 different phases in your design process. Let me explain. In the thinking, you're like a philosopher. You have to put a big step backward. Go away from your daily pressure and think about, why am I really making this presentation? What is really the objective? And who are these people? And why would they listen? What do I want to achieve? How will I achieve that? Just take that bit of time to think about this. Once you know that clearly for yourself, then you can start building the logic. Building the logic is like being an architect or being an engineer. It's thinking about, to get from A to B, what arguments do we need? What's the logical connection between them? What arguments can I get rid of? How can I make it easy to understand? How can I make it scalable so that I can have a short story when I have little time or a long story when I have a lot of time? Then after that, I can become the artist. I can add some color to it, I can add some visuals, some examples. Actually, what I need to do there is see how can I catch the attention of my audience and keep the attention, how can I illustrate my words, and how can I make sure that they really recall everything I told them. This requires more of an artistic and creative approach. And then in the last phase, I will become the executor, the builder. At that point in time, I make slides, I make documents, I write a speech. At this point in time, you don't want to be thinking about the content. That's already done, because when you make slides while creating content, you're doing both badly. So the good thing, or one of the good things of this framework, is that the different phases are also in order of importance. The thinking is by far the most important. Then comes the logic, then the story, and then the media. And what do I see in most presentations in businesses is that the thinking hadn't been done right. When we'll go later on deeper into the model, the 4 phases can be split up into 12 different steps. But I would say at this point in time, that's not so important. Let's stay at the level of the 4 phases: the thinking, the logic, the story, and the media. So thinking, some reflection in the beginning, media at the end, creating all your media. In the middle sits how you create the content, which is the logic and the story. In the logic, we will create a hierarchical structure with all the key messages and the logic behind them. We want to make that logic easy to understand, as simple as possible. We want to make it concise, but still comprehensive, and we'll also make it scalable, so that you can tell the story in 5 minutes if you have 5 minutes, or in 2 hours if you have 2 hours. In the story part, we will add what I call story elements or story handles. These are details, data, illustrations, little stories, some color, so that you make it attractive, so that you make it clear, convincing with some emotion, and memorable. What I see is when people apply this, the number of slides they create is divided by 4 to 5. Instead of using 100 slides, they use 20 slides. The work to prepare is reduced by some 20 to 30%. There's a lot less time in slides, but there's a bit more time in reflection. But most importantly, the impact of their presentations goes up drastically and their audiences are a lot happier. So most important is this: thinking, logic, story, media. And in the next videos, we will look at each of those in more detail.